Welcome, everyone. Without further ado, I think we can start. So, Annalie, I'd like to hand over to you.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome. So what we're going to look at today is the task 1, and this one is describing the process, okay? So we're going to look at various things, okay? How to understand the diagram. We're going to look at the structure that you use for the task 1. And we're also going to look at how to link those paragraphs and your ideas together, okay? So this is the example that we are going to use today. So just take a look at that and take a look at the question. So we're looking at cement production and concrete production. Yeah, this is academic task 1. Well, this is one of the options, which is describing a process. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the key things for the process. Okay, so you have to describe a diagram. It could be a man-made process, so it could be some kind of manufacturing process, or it can also be a natural process. The life cycle of an animal is quite a common one, or something like the water cycle. So you have two options there. Today we're going to look at the man-made. Okay, and remember, minimum of 150 words, and you should really not take any more than 20 minutes for the task 1. Okay, leaving you 40 minutes for the task 2. Okay, and what is the task? You need to select the key features and describe each of the steps in turn. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what specifically is the subject of this process? Just put it up on chat. What are we looking at here? What's the subject? Okay, very good. Yes, cement production and concrete production. Yeah, Jose, it's two different processes that combine together. Okay, very good. So is this a linear process or a cyclical process? Okay, a linear. Okay, very good. So linear, we have a starting point and we have an end point. Okay, what other types of processes might be linear? Okay, can anyone think of any examples? We've got concrete, okay, some kind of manufacturing, tea making. Okay, yeah, that's a very common one. Okay, any other? Coffee production? Sorry, Sushan, there's, if you're a member, I can't hear you. You can just write things up on chat, okay? Okay, packaging chips, yes, books, sugar production, okay, very good. So lots of manufacturing processes that have a starting and a finishing point, okay? And could you give me some examples of a cyclical process? Okay, yeah, life cycle, for example, life cycle of the carbon cycle, very good, or any of those kind of energy systems. Okay, maybe the life cycle of a fish. Yeah, okay. So just pay attention, make sure, is this a linear process or is this a cyclical process where you need to say that the cycle begins again each time. Okay, all right. So having a look at cement production, first of all, how many steps can you see? How many steps can you see in the cement production? Okay, we've got an array. I mean, I think you can divide it up into, I think there's 4 main stages, but you could also divide it up into maybe a few more stages. Okay. All right. And what is the first step in the cement production? Okay, good. Is the crushing. Okay, that's the first one, is the crusher. And when we move on to the concrete production, what's the final stage? Okay, so at the end of the cement production, it's bagging it. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Or yeah, if we move on to concrete production, then it's mixing the concrete and creating the concrete. Okay. Good. All right. So there's a very specific type of grammar that you're going to be using for the process. All processes, doesn't really matter what the subject is. So which tense are we going to be using to describe something? This is something that happens on a regularly, okay, frequently, yeah, okay, so present, probably present simple, yeah, it's going to be present simple. You're not really going to be using a continuous tense, but the present simple, that's right, Ilya. Okay, and what, is it going to be active or passive? Okay, very good. It's definitely going to be with the man-made, the production or the manufacturing, it's almost all passive. Okay, because the object is what's important. If you have a natural process, then you're probably going to have a bit more of a mix between active and passive. Okay, so let's move on now. So what is the structure for the task 1? What are the 3 elements we need to make sure that we put in our task 1? Okay, very good. So introduction, that's right. And the overview and the body. Okay, very good. So Amra's got it, intro, body, and overview. Or it's not really a conclusion, but yeah, it's the summary of what we're talking about. Okay, so introduction, okay, overview. And then usually it's quite good to have 2 paragraphs in your body just to give it a little bit more of a structure. Okay, good. Yes, first details, Mariana, and then the second details. Okay. So what do we put in the introduction? Okay, yeah. Okay, very good, Mariana. So we're paraphrasing the question, okay, and what they're saying, what the process is, Jose. Okay, or Altair restating the question, exactly, okay. And how many sentences do you normally put in the introduction? Yeah, I'd say probably, you know, it's very unlikely you're going to use more than 2, probably best to keep it to 1. Yes, good, Marana. Keep it very short, the introduction. Okay. Then what do we put in the overview? Yeah, you're right, Bharat. 1 is enough. 1 should be enough. What about in the overview? Okay. Okay, good. So it's a summary of what you can see, the key features, okay, the main information. Very good. Okay, and okay, very good. Altair, you can say the number of steps. Okay, very good. All right, so a summary of the key steps. Then what are we going to put in the body? What are we going to do in the body? Okay, yeah, so we're going to describe the process, the details of the actual process. That's very good. Okay, and definitely more details. Okay, so the specific steps. And we're going to use some linking phrases in order to show what the process is. Okay, All right. Same thing in the 2 body paragraphs, but just moving through the process. Okay, very good. All right. So let's start with the introduction. Okay, so as we said, best way to do the introduction is really to just paraphrase the question in some way. So how do we, well, I've given it away there. What are some of the ways that we can paraphrase? Looked at this before. What are the different ways that you can paraphrase, generally speaking? Okay, very good, Brad. Synonyms. Okay, we can use different vocabulary. We can change the tense. Okay. Anything else we can do? Okay, we can change the words, so different parts of the same word using word formation. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, and remember you can also change the sentence around, you can change the voice if it's active, that kind of thing. So yes, same words in different forms. Adepoju, that's exactly right. Okay. Be very precise, make sure that you're accurate. Okay. And don't put any detail in. Okay, this is true for all of the task ones. This is, we're just putting in a general point here. Okay. So we need to think about what the key words are that we can change, that we can use synonyms for. Okay. So for example, shows, that would be a very good one to use a synonym for. What other words there in the question do you think would be easy to convert? Okay, we'll look at the actual changes in a minute, but what words? Okay, stages, very good. You can definitely change stage to something else. What other words in the question could you change? Okay, very good. Produce, that would be a good one to change. Okay, so we have stages. We have the actual name of it, produce, as you said. Okay, very good. Yeah, Faris, building purposes. Okay, so let's have a look how we can do that. So the diagram, don't need to do that with diagram because that's just what it is. So what can we use instead of shows? Okay, very good. Manjuba illustrates, Brad depicts, very good. Or presents. Okay, very good. We've gone with illustrates. Outlines, that's very nice, Pi. Illustrates the, rather than using stages, we could use, okay, very good, steps. Okay, that's the best word that you can use there for stages. Involved in cement. Okay, well, we got making in the question. Okay, production. Yeah, okay, Adri, there's quite a few people have got that. Okay, so again, we're just changing it around. We're changing some of the words. Okay, all right. And then how cement is then used to, so we need to change produce. Okay, so we've got manufacture, we've got make or create. Okay, those are all very good. Render's slightly different, I think. Okay, we've got manufacture. Okay. And concrete for, so rather than building purposes, okay, very good, Rushan. So construction's a very nice way of using another word to building. Okay. So same information, but we've changed the vocabulary, we've changed some of the word forms. Okay. So now let's move on to the overview. Okay, so thinking about the band score, we're looking at the middle ones, band 5, band 6, and band 7. So remember, if there is no clear overview in your answer, you're going to get only a maximum of band 5 for the task response. Okay, you can't get more than 5, however good your actual detail is. That's kind of a limit on your score. So then it's very, very hard to get something like a 7. Okay, and to get a 7, Then you have a clear overview. One of the ways to make it clear is in a separate paragraph, and you've really highlighted the main trends, the main differences. Okay, so the overview is really quite critical in the task 1. Okay, so let's look at how to write an overview for our cement and concrete production. Okay, so summarizing the process. Okay, as I think it was Atir mentioned earlier on, so the number of stages is very important to mention. And we can actually mention specifically the first stage and the last stage. Okay. And very important, what's the purpose? What are we actually doing in this process? Okay. So let's have a look at some of the words. So we're going to start with the purpose, okay, because that's the clear thing. So what can we put in the word there? Okay, very good. In order to, Roshan, it's very good. It's on top of it today. Good. So in order to make cement. Okay. Okay, very good. Certain would work very well. Certain raw ingredients. Any other ideas or specific? Okay. Or yeah, you could actually just give the number 2 raw ingredients, but certain or specific works perfectly well. And then in brackets, we're going to give the actual information. Okay, limestone and clay. Okay. And then what about the next word? Are processed in... Okay, we got, it's better if you're more specific. Yeah, okay, so again, Rushan, 4 stages before being bagged. Okay, we can count the number of stages later. I think it depends how specific you want to be, okay? Several's okay, Olga, but I think it would be better if you could be specific about the number, okay? All right, and Roman script or otherwise, yeah, okay. So that's the first part, okay. Then we're going to move on. So the cement is, okay, very good, Rohan, is then mixed in specific look about the key information. I think I've got, okay, good, we're getting there. So we got amounts, ratios, quantities, very good, Joan, proportions. That's the one that we had, very good, Damalari. But the other words, quantities, amounts would work perfectly well. With how many other materials? Okay, again, you could use several, or yeah, we could be, again, specific here, 3 other materials to produce concrete. Okay. So summary of what we're doing and, you know, what the number of stages in each part of the process. Okay. Then, okay, so that was the first and the last process. The 3 other materials, Pi, are water, sand, and gravel. Is that okay? So first of all, we make cement, then the cement is used with the 3 other ingredients in order to make concrete. Okay, all right. So let's now look at the body. Okay, so in the body, remember, we give the actual key details. Okay, and one of the very important pieces of vocabulary or linking information is to show where each of the stages is. So when you move from one stage to the other, then have some kind of phrase to show that this is a movement from one step to the next. Okay. All right. As we said before, make sure that you're using the passive voice here because this is a man-made process, so it's all going to be in the passive. okay? And mix up the words, try and use different forms of the words, different structures, that kind of thing, okay? All right, so we're going to have a look at, going to do a little bit of grammar here and a little bit of matching, okay? We're going to look at the linking words in a minute, Ben, okay? So if you look on the left, we've got some of the verbs. So we've got put, pass, combine, crush, and grind, okay? So we're going to put those verbs into the first body paragraph, but we need to make sure that we're using the right form, okay? So you've got to look at the grammar as well. So the first stage involves, okay, very good, everyone's got that. Yes, some Irish, what, Brad? So crushing after involve, okay, we have the ing form, okay, very good. And then which, okay, very good, Rohan, very good, okay, is then combined in the mixer, okay. All right, and then that creates a powder. So this powder, again, using this is another way of linking information together. So, okay, is passed through, okay. You could say put through, Jose, you could say is put through, but it's like it's a cylinder, so passed through works quite well. Yes, very good, Elia, is passed through a rotating heater before, okay. Nearly there. Got to think about our past, irregular past tenses here, guys. Is grind is irregular. Okay, very good, thank you. Yeah, Brad and Cook. Okay, being ground into cement. Okay. All right, and then finally, the final product. Okay, Debangshi, I think, is ahead of us, is put into bags, ready for use. Okay, very good, Richie, Constantinos, perfect. Okay, so we're using mainly the passive voice there, but we're also using different types of structures, okay? So we've got involves plus an ing form, we've got before plus an ing form, and then we've got various passives, but all of it in the present simple tense, okay? We're not using any continuous forms. We're not using any other different types of tenses, okay? So then we need to, as Ben was pointing out, we need to look at the linking stages. These are very, very important. So which phrases there are used to move us from one stage to the next? Okay. Okay, good. Which, then? Okay, the first stage, good. Okay, so yeah, the first stage. Okay, and then which, and then, okay, before, and the final product. Okay, very good. So we can see that we're moving through the stages here. Okay. We'll look at the second body paragraph and then we'll see if we can come up with some more linking phrases. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to move into the second one. So makes sense, you know, if there's a clear way to divide up the body into different paragraphs, then obviously you need to follow that. So here we've got cement production, concrete production. So one paragraph on cement production, one paragraph on concrete production. Okay, and you know, always have a look at the diagram before you start and try and think where would be a good place for me to divide this up. Okay, where would be a good place to finish the first paragraph and move on to the second paragraph. Okay, so now we're going to describe the second part, which is the concrete production. Okay, and very, very important point, in the same way that when you have a chart or you have a line graph, it's very important that in the body you give the specific figures. Okay, you have to include exact data. Same thing with the diagram. So if you have, for example, temperatures, or you have amounts, or you have periods of time, which is very common, then make sure that you put those into your description. Okay, don't miss them out. Maybe look for them before you start writing and just circle them so that you don't forget, because that's an easy thing to miss out, but it does mean that you'll lose marks on your task achievement for missing out key information. Okay, so let's move on. So we're starting the second paragraph here. What are we going to put in the first gap? To, okay, very good, to produce concrete, to make concrete, okay. That works very, very well. So we've changed production to produce, to manufacture concrete. That works very well, okay. So the cement, okay, very good, is put, is added. That's very nice. Is fed, very good, Rohan, that's really nice, yeah. Okay, is added, we use to a large machine known as a, okay, very good, so that's a concrete mixer, okay. All right, along with, I wouldn't use on the other hand in the task one. On the other hand is more something that you would use when you're giving arguments, okay? Similarly, things like moreover or furthermore, they really belong in the task too, okay? Yeah, so along with 3 other ingredients, again, if some of you put several, I think that's fine. Just one point, when you're writing this and you have a small number, it's better to write it out as a word, okay, rather than writing the numeral, okay. So then we're going to look at those 3 other ingredients. So what do we call the small stones? Okay, very good, Constantinos. Gravel. Oh, we're including the information at the bottom, so we've got everything in there. Accounts for, okay, very good, Rohan and Rushan, you're ahead of me. So we have percentages here. One of the good things you can do if you have percentages, and again, this is also true of the bar charts and the line graphs, is where it makes sense to use fractions. Okay, because it's easy to write the percentage, but if you use a fraction, you're showing that you understand the different language. Okay, good. So yeah, half of the mixture is is better than, maybe better than saying 50%. Okay, all right. Then we are going to add a bit more information. So okay, we're actually connecting 2 parts together here. So we have the gravel, half the mixture, and then we have the remaining ingredients. Okay, very good. While the remaining ingredients are, yeah, okay, so yeah, sand, cement, and water. Okay, very good. Sand, cement, and water. Okay. Good. Okay, and then we're just going to put the last part together. So the mixer, okay, good, rotates, okay, rotates, maybe turns as well you could use. Okay, so sometimes, there might be just an arrow, or there might be some kind of something that's just really on the diagram, but you need to include that in the information. So again, always look very, very closely. Okay, yeah, Ruchi and Mitali, I think you're ahead. Churns is, I'm not quite sure, it's quite an interesting word, the mix of churns. You wouldn't really say churns to combine, but it's a very nice piece of vocabulary there. Very good. Yeah, finally, ultimately, very good, Rohan. It's our star pupil today. Ultimately, finally, something like that. Okay. Oh, in a circular fashion, Pi, that's very nice. Okay. Yeah, not consequent. What about eventually? Why would we not use eventually? In what kind of situation would we use the word eventually? Anyone explain? What's the precise meaning of that word? It's not really, I know in some languages there's a word very similar, which means uncertainty, but it's not really. You might use it in the carbon cycle, for example. Yes, okay, thank you, Brad. It's after a long period of time. Okay, so when you have these natural processes like the water cycle or the carbon cycle, it's a very, very useful word to use there. But production tends to be pretty rapid. It tends to be, you know, bum, bum, bum. So you're probably not going to use eventually there. Okay, so remember that's over a long period of time. Okay, yeah, we can say moves in a clockwise direction. I think that's fine, Rahul. That works perfectly. Okay. All right, so that's the end of that one. So can you think of some other linking phrases that we can use? Just generally to talk about different stages, any linking phrases that you can think of that we haven't used yet. I think some people put finally there, which is a very good one to use. While is very, very useful. Any others that we didn't use today? Thus, okay, lastly, very good. Okay, ultimately. Okay, all right, very good. Whereas, Adri, yes. Furthermore, I would really use in the task too. It's really more to do with arguments. Afterwards works very well. Yeah, and then therefore you might use as well for something like that. Okay. All right, so here on the last slide, we've got the whole thing together. So you can see the introductory sentence, then we've got the overview, and then we've got the 2 paragraphs which make up the body. Okay, so you can have a look at that. And I'm also going to give you some general overall tips. Okay, so always, always, always with the writing, task 1, task 2, don't jump in. Take a moment, you know, make sure that you've got the information correctly. Some of these machines that they have for the process can be a bit complicated when you first look at them. So just take a moment, have a look at it, make sure you understand it, make sure you've got all of the details, and then start writing. Okay. Keep it to 20 minutes, as we've said before. That's very, very important. You do really need the 40 minutes for the task too. And again, we looked at this before. Know how long, or what 150 or 160 words looks like in your handwriting, so that you don't have to count the words. It's a terrible waste of time in the exam to sit down and count your words. Okay. And one way of knowing that is it's very easy to get hold of those answer sheets with the lines on them exactly the way they are in the exam. Okay, and practice on that and just know exactly what it looks like. All right, and try and cover as many different types of process as you can. Okay, so man-made processes, natural processes, linear processes, cyclical processes, You know, all of these need to be covered, as many different types as you can, so that you're less likely to be shocked when you come into the exam. Okay. It's a good point, Bera. I just want to do that. It's if you copy the wording, the exact wording from the question, this is also true for task 2, that will be excluded from your word count. Okay. But only if it's an exact copy of what is in the task. Okay. And quite a few people ask about, should I start with task 1? Should I start with task 2? I don't think there's either way is a right way to do it. I think it's quite a good idea to practice both ways and maybe see if one of them feels better for you. If you feel like, I really want to get the task 2 done, and then, you know, I know how much time I've got for my task 1, it's perfectly okay. You get both questions at the same time, so it's not an issue. You can do that. But, you know, you just, whatever suits you. I don't think there's, you know, a right or a wrong answer in terms of that. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, so I can see a lot of questions coming up in the chat, but before we start to discuss them, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Annalie for presenting today. So thank you very much, Annalie. That was great.
Thank you.
And we do have quite a lot of your questions to get through, so I think we can jump right in. If you can add your questions to the Q&A, then you can vote for the most popular questions. So we'll start to answer them first. Okay, so rather than asking questions in the chat, put them in the Q&A and we can start to discuss them now. So the most popular question at the moment is from Anne, who is asking, what is the difference between the introduction and an overview?
Yeah, between the introduction and the overview.
Yeah.
Yes. So the introduction, you are going to paraphrase the information in the question. You're just going to say what the subject of the diagram is, or the chart, the line graph. In the overview, you're going to pick out the key features. So the overview is really a summary. In the case of the process, then you're generally going to say how many steps there are, the first step and the final step. Okay.
Great. We have a question here from Suzanne, which I think I can answer, Annalie. They're saying, I have my writing IELTS exam on the 23rd of March, so I need help with reading, speaking, and listening. Suzanne, a lot of this help you can find on our Facebook page. We have recordings of all the webinars we've produced so far. So on our Facebook group, you can see the slides and you can see the recordings from them. They're on writing task 2, writing task 1, and also we recently did a speaking webinar as well. So you can check out our Facebook page. Also on IELTSonlinetest.com, we offer some premium services. One is a speaking evaluation with an IELTS examiner, such as Annalie or myself. We'd be available to do a full speaking exam with you and give you feedback on your performance. So that's an option. We also offer a writing correction and checking service as well. So you'd get grade and feedback on your writing. If that's something you're interested in, you can find that on our website, and I'll put the link to that in the chat. So from our next question we have from Adri, who is asking, what about with charts? Would we use the same outline with when describing a chart, the introduction, overview, and body?
Yeah, all of the task ones have the same structure. Okay, first your introduction, second your overview, and third your body, which is probably 2 paragraphs. And each of those elements should be clearly in a separate paragraph. Okay. Just there was something that came up on the chat. There is no conclusion in the task 1. Okay, the conclusion is part of task 2. In the task 1, you're writing an overview, which is just a summary of what's in the diagram. Okay, you don't need to make any kind of conclusion, opinion, anything like that. Yeah.
Great. Faris is asking, is it possible to have 2 diagrams at the same time?
I've never seen that. What I have seen is where you have 2 elements of it, which then join together. I think there was one to do with pencil production, but I can't quite remember.
I remember that one, actually.
Yes, that was one of those course books that we've all used.
Yeah.
So you can sort of have 2 starting points, which then sort of halfway through join together to get the end product. So you would describe one branch. Then a very useful linking word would be, for example, meanwhile, or at the same time, or simultaneously. The second branch takes place, and then you describe the end product. But I think it's quite rare to get 2 separate processes.
Yeah, I'd agree. Just to answer a question from Ragda in the chat, who's asking, could we give them an outline of writing task 2, giving an opinion? Ragda, we have done a webinar on this topic before, and you can find it on our Facebook page. So if you scroll down through the videos, you'll be able to find the full recording of that webinar on there. Okay, so a question from Rachel, who says they are overwhelmed with graphs. If we get a mix of a pie chart and a bar graph, or 2 bar graphs, what should we do? I know this means that we have to compare, but I find it difficult to summarize, and I'm afraid I get lost in the little details.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, very good question. Okay, if you have 2 separate, for example, a pie chart and a bar chart, if the subject is slightly different, so let's say one of them is looking at age groups, and then the other one is looking at gender, you don't need to compare them, okay? So you will just talk about them separately. For example, in your introductory sentence, you will say, the pie chart depicts X, while the bar chart depicts Y, okay? Then in your overview, again, you will have 2 overviews, okay? I mean, it will be 1 paragraph, but you will have an overview for each of them. And in the body, you'll describe one, and then you will move on to describe the other. So you actually keep them quite separate. Okay, it's very useful also when you move from one to the other to use an expression like turning now to the bar chart or moving on to the bar chart to make it very, very clear. But I think maybe what's happening is that you're trying to compare something where it's not really possible to compare it. Okay, so just keep them separate.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely. A question from Andre. What's the key difference between passive and active writing?
Well, they're different grammatical forms. So the passive you would use when the object is the most important thing that we're talking about. So in the process, it's always the object that is important. We don't know who is doing these things. We don't know who is mixing the limestone and clay, if there is anyone. And we don't really care. They're not important in this situation. So then that is when we use the passive. So the object of the sentence is what we are focusing on. When you use the active, you're focusing on the subject. You're focusing on the person or the whoever is doing the action. Okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
just
good
like
luck, Rushan.
Yes, exactly. That was exactly. Good luck, Rushan. We're just Rushan is saying they have their test tomorrow, so best of luck to you. A question here from Bobby: can we skip some stages or rows in a column, for example, if it's a table, if there's a lot of data to describe, if the process is very long or the table has lots of information, is it okay to select?
Yeah, okay, so I think we're talking about two separate things here. If it's the process, you should talk about all of the stages, okay? And there will not be that many stages that you wouldn't be able to talk about all of them. So in the process, go through each stage at a time and make sure you've covered everything. If you have something like a table, that's a different situation. And you have a lot of information, then yes, you will definitely need to select certain pieces of information to include. So that would be things like exceptions, highest points, lowest points, similarities, differences. So yes, in the table, if you have a lot of numbers, and that does happen quite a lot, but no, when it comes to the process or the map also, you should talk about everything, okay? There was another question from Pi, which I just wanted to answer, and you're right, in the overview, you don't put any detailed information, so no figures, no percentages, nothing like that in the overview. It's just very general.
Yeah, okay. Great. Just to say, well-wishing from Moreno here, who says, break a leg, Roshan. So nice idiomatic language there, Moreno. It's great. We have a question from Ruchi, who is asking, please explain how to judge that we have completed the required word count.
Okay, so the minimum word count is 150 for the task 1. And the best thing to do is that you do a lot of practice examples and count your words when you're doing the examples, because there's no time limit, and then get to know what that looks like. Okay. So make sure, you have a good idea. This is definitely, 160, 170 words in my handwriting. So it's really just a question of practicing and getting to know what that looks like.
Definitely. I'd just like to mention, because there's been a lot of interest in the general training and speaking webinars. So just to let you know the dates of the next webinar, next Thursday, we'll be looking at speaking, the speaking test with a focus on part 3. And the week after that, on the 28th of March, we'll be focusing on general training, letter writing. So that's our plan for the rest of the month. And then we'll be able to give you more details of what we're doing in a future webinar. So just back to your questions, because we have still have quite a few to get through. Maheen, can we write the overview after the body paragraph? So instead of writing the overview after the introduction, can we write it at the end after the details?
Yes, definitely. You can write it at the end. So after the introduction or at the end, but do make sure that you have got it in a separate paragraph, and that it's clearly indicated by using a linking phrase like overall. But yes, yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. I have a question from Satpreet, who is asking, in the body paragraph, can I use the words which are not mentioned in the diagram at all? For example, could they say, using the conveyor belt, limestone and clay are fed into a crusher, where the word conveyor belt doesn't appear in the diagram?
I think in this case it would be fine, because it is clearly a conveyor belt, and I think that's some very good vocabulary that would get you sort of the less common vocabulary, which is what you need for a band 7 score. Be careful of adding additional information. You would have to be very, very certain that that is exactly what it was, and certainly you don't want to add anything else, even if you know that that's true or that's part of this process. Don't add it unless it's there on the on the diagram.
Yeah, definitely. just a question, can we email you the invite to future webinars? At the moment, I'm not sure that we can, but the link will be on our Facebook group, which is just in the comments there. That will go up, it should go up tomorrow, the link to our next webinar. And we will also have it on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. So if you visit either of those places, you'll be able to register for the next webinars. Okay. A question from Rohan. Hi, Rohan. IELTS have an online test as well. Is it easier online or offline? Good question as well. Yeah.
Well, it's the same test, so it's not, in terms of content, it's not easier or more difficult. Again, I think this is just personal choice. Do you find it easier to do something online, or would you prefer to do it in a written form? Certainly, I would prefer to do it in a written form, I know. But that's entirely up to the individual to just decide that. But the content is not different, okay?
Yeah. Question from Faris about tables. Can we explain how to analyze and make a plan before we start writing a paragraph when you're trying to analyze a table?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the table, if you have a lot of figures in the table, that's definitely one where you want to spend a bit of time, a little bit of time, you know, just really looking at it and try to find things that are similar. Okay, so you will probably find these are not random tables that they just put out there. You know, there are similar trends, there are key features that you can pick out. So you need to just spend a little bit of time. Decide what the highest figures are. Can you find some figures that are higher than the others? What are the lowest figures? Okay. Are there any similarities? Maybe everything is going up. Maybe there is some kind of similarity you can highlight. And then are there some exceptions to that? So there's an overall trend, but maybe one or two things are different. So that you can pick out. You can also group categories together if they have similar figures. I think one good way to think about it with the table is if you were explaining it to somebody, if somebody said, you know, what's this information telling me? You wouldn't just list the numbers because nobody would be able to process that. It wouldn't mean anything. But you would try and find something that you could say. So think about that. What could I say if somebody asked me about this information? What does it mean? You know, what's it telling us? And then that is what you need to put into your body. Yeah,
definitely. And that could be a good topic for a future webinar as well, just focusing purely on describing a table. So thanks for that. We have a few related questions from Mir Manzarul and Adri, and also Ruchi as well. Sorry, Rohan in the chat, to do with the conclusion for a task 1. Do we need to write a conclusion? And then perhaps what's the difference between an overview and a conclusion?
Okay, so the task 1, you will write only an overview. There's no conclusion. And an overview is a summary of the key pieces of information. Okay, so it's still just a description of what is happening in the bar chart, the process, the map. Okay, a conclusion is in task 2, and it's always the last paragraph. And the conclusion is where you give your opinion related to the topic that you've been asked about. Okay, so the conclusion would be more subjective, whereas the body paragraphs would be more objective. Okay.
Great. A question from Mushtaba, who is asking, and this is a good one, what are the key differences between linear and cyclical processes?
Okay, so with the cyclical process, you want to include at the end a sentence showing that you understand that it's a cyclical process. Something very simple, just like, and then the cycle begins again. Okay, and then you've shown clearly to the examiner that you understand that this is a cycle. Also with the cycle, there isn't a clear place to start. So really you're going to just pick something that makes sense to you and move around the cycle, but there's no defined starting place and finishing place. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably the main difference, but in both of them, you know, you're still going to describe step by step, and you're still going to use the linking phrases to show the movement between those different steps.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Question from Bobby, how to decide how to divide the information in 2 paragraphs in task 1? So yeah, how do you know which information to include in which body paragraph?
Okay, if it's obvious, so if you've got, for example, like we talked about before, a bar chart and a pie chart, you know, then you would have 1 paragraph on the bar chart and 1 paragraph on the pie chart. Similarly, in the example we looked at today, I think we had a clear division between the cement production and the concrete production. If there isn't a clear point, you know, in the middle where it's obvious that you would want to move to a different paragraph, then, you know, just divide it equally, more or less, between the 2 halves. So if there's 10 steps, 5 steps in the first paragraph, 5 steps in the second paragraph. You won't lose any marks, okay? They're not taking that into consideration in the same way that they are for the task 2. But it's always easier to read something which is divided up into more paragraphs.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Guys, I think we are rapidly coming up to the end of the webinar. So I think we can answer one more question, and that it will be from Susan. What if my words exceed 200? Will I be penalized?
There's no penalty for writing a lot. There's only a minimum word count. There's no maximum word count. Really, the time is the key thing. Can you know, are you able to write that many words in the 20 minutes? You don't want to be taking too long. And make sure that everything that you're writing is relevant to the task.
Yeah.
Other than that, there is no penalty for having, you know, however many words. There's no maximum word count. Excellent.
And there, I will answer one more question from Serik, which is, can we send you our writing to check? Serik, you can't send it to us directly, but we do offer a writing checking service via our website at IELTSonlinetest.com. So if you do want to take part in that, writing IELTS examiner can read over your work and give you very detailed feedback on your writing. So that's an option for you. So I think we need to wrap up there for today. I'd just like to extend a very big thank you to Annalie for presenting, and thank you everyone for taking part and asking so many great questions today. So thanks very much. Thank you, Annalie, and we will be back next Thursday to look at another speaking topic, speaking part 3. So hope to see some of you then. Okay. So,
bye. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for coming.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. See you again. Bye for now.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye.